20-year-old Stephen Hilder fell to his death skydiving in the summer of 2003.
Got a knock on the door during the evening on the 4th of July, and there were 2 policemen on the doorstep, and you can tell that something's wrong.
Unless you've lost a child, I don't think anyone can understand what that feels like. And to not know why it happened or exactly what happened, to be in this situation where there's no sense to it either, if there ever is any sense in losing a child, you can't describe it, but it changes your life and changes it forever.
Stephen's death was the result of an act of sabotage. The straps on his parachute had been cut.
I don't really remember what went through my mind at the time. You're just in such a state of shock. But certainly right from the beginning, it made no sense that someone would want to do this to Steve.
And within hours of his death, the entire country was aware of it.
A skydiver who fell 13,000 feet to his death in Lincolnshire yesterday has been named as Stephen Paul Hilder.
This was the 20-year-old's final jump.
His parachute had been sabotaged, its cords were deliberately cut.
Police strongly suspect he was murdered.
The media interest in what happened to Steve is obviously something we'd never experienced before, and it's very difficult when you open a newspaper or turn the television on the radio and completely out of the blue your son's being talked about.
Every single channel was just showing a picture of Steve saying skydiver murdered. And I couldn't think of any motive why anybody would want to take his life. All that could go through my mind at that time was somebody was either targeting a skydiver, any skydiver, or they were after an individual but got the wrong man.
Stephen's girlfriend, Ruth Woodhouse, had been told about his death while on holiday. It was only later that she heard the murder theory.
I was on the way home and started getting signal on my mobile, and it started beeping and beeping and beeping, and I got all these messages like from loads of people, and then we got to a service station and it was on all the papers in the service station. There was my face on the papers, and my face had actually been in the papers before I knew about it.
Detectives hoped the media coverage would throw up a new lead from the public. At the same time, they were getting briefed on the mechanics of a parachute. Skydiving instructor Paul Hollow was their guide.
Now, on a normal skydive, when we want to use our main parachute, we grab this little handle and we pull out a little mini parachute that's inside here. So this is what we call a pilot chute. This then catches the air and acts as our anchor in the sky. As we fall away from this anchor, the bridle line, this piece of black tape, pulls out all the way up to this main pin here. The bridle can then pull the pin, which opens the flaps of the container, and then the rest of it pulls out the parachute for us. Just in case things don't quite go according to plan with the main parachute, we can grab the handle on the other side of the pack here, which we use to deploy the reserve parachute. This has a cable going up from the top here. It goes over the top of the parachute. It comes straight down to another pin. So as soon as this pin is moved, the flaps can open, and this white bit that you see here is the top of a big spring that jumps out and acts in exactly the same way as our main pilot chute. It grabs the air and acts as our anchor in the sky and pulls out the reserve for us.
Here, a skydiver releases a faulty main parachute and opens the reserve. But both Stephen's main and reserve chutes had been sabotaged.
Here then, we have the main pilot chute. This had been pulled out, and what must have happened is they pulled it out and they then cut the bridle. They'd just fold it back up and put it back inside the container. So now, when you go to throw the pilot chute away, that's exactly all you're doing. You're throwing that away, but because the bridle had been cut, it can no longer pull the pin. If the pin can't be pulled, the flaps stay closed, and you can never ever have the main parachute come out. And he tried to use the reserve, and he pulled his reserve handle. The reserve parachute did deploy. He pulled the reserve canopy out of the container and started it deploying, but unfortunately the reserve was no longer attached to him. Here are the risers of the main parachute. Okay. Underneath those we then have the bits of strapping that go to the lines of the reserve canopy itself, and these had been cut, so it was as if somebody had put scissors or a knife or whatever had been used to cut the risers about there, and had then closed the flap over the top of them.
There was also a backup device which would automatically release Stephen's parachute if he didn't open it. He'd activated this device before the jump, but because the straps to his parachutes had been cut, it was to prove useless.